Good evening, Mayor and Council. It is now 7 o'clock, and we are live online.
Thank you. Welcome. Today is City Council workshop, so there'll be no public comments during this meeting. We will start with roll call. We have Molly and Jeff and Dan and myself, and our mayor, Lee, is online, and also Paloma. Excused is Amber.
Correct.
Just Amber.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Lee and Paloma, you're there?
Hello.
Hi, Paloma.
Evening.
Hi, Lee. Our first item on the workshop agenda is Lee and Copper Rule Inventory. And Ed Balicki is going to lead us in that discussion.
And it's lead and copper rule.
I said lead, didn't I?
Yeah.
Lead.
It's
Yeah,
all good.
lead.
And if I could just give a brief introduction, the US EPA, which regulates public drinking water systems, started promulgating rules on lead and copper back in the early 1990s. Last year, they did an update. We knew it was coming. That was going to put some real teeth in it and some real timelines. And I think one of the first conversations I had with Ed when I came on in early 2021 was about this looming deadline for lead and copper. And he and his staff have done an extraordinary job working with our consultant team. Ed's presentation tonight is part of the required public notification in the law, and we are glad to have him here to give an overview of all of the things he's been working on to bring us into compliance with the lead and copper rule. So thanks, Ed, for coming.
Thank you for giving the introduction. I did provide a brief summary in your packet, so that anybody, you can view it, and the public can view it on the website as well. So as Chris touched on, we have what's called the lead and copper rule, which the purpose of that is to minimize lead in the drinking water and control levels of copper in the drinking water. Most recently, this past year, it's been, as Chris mentioned, it's been building for several years. There's significant revisions to the lead and copper rule. The biggest revision was they mandated that we inventory all the service lines, which is the pipe connection from the city's water mains into your house. It's called the lead service line inventory because the purpose of it is to try to find lead or galvanized pipes, which may be considered lead depending on the age when they were produced, and remove them from your system. So the deadline for the initial inventory is October 16th of 2024. So we've been working diligently to provide as much information and identify as much materials as we could prior to that deadline. So the more we identify early, it just makes everything easier for us moving forward. So I will show the where we're at to date. So I've been working, the city contracted with WSB Technical Services, which also provide us with our dam safety and water resource support. You'll see in front of it, in front of you and on the screens now, the GIS map of the city. So every circle you see has been a property that's been identified and shown as non-lead. So of the 4,500 or so residences, services that are in the city, we've identified a total of let me back that up, I apologize. So the service line is split in two sections. The dividing line is the curb stop, which is your external shutoff valve. So we have to identify the street side of the curb stop, and we have to identify the home side of the curb stop. So in the top section where you say non-lead, there's 2,440. That is the entirety of the line. But you'll see to the left box, there's verified service lines, which is 2,700, where we've only gotten one half of that puzzle. So that's the discrepancy of the 300 you see there. And then there's the remaining 2,100 of the unknown. So a copy of this GIS will be made available to the public. We will post it on the city's website. Some of the features will not be available. There's some like working features that we have. That you will have a search feature where you can type in your property if you don't want to like zoom around and look in on it. But that's the public information portion of it.
And Ed, are the blue dots are the non-lead?
The blue dots are, I apologize, completely identified. That's as non-lead.
Okay.
The gray circles you see are unidentified or unknown. And if I'll zoom in a little here, you can see these properties here off of West Center where we identified, this is on the street side of the service line, is identified as copper. We still haven't identified what's in the house as of yet. To identify certain properties, we used the date of 1986, which is when excuse me, when U.S. passed zero lead or lead-free fixtures. So there was no lead solder, no lead use in plumbing in the United States. So our consultants worked with the city assessors and Dutchess County GIS to establish like properties, any changes in the properties, any building department records, permits, anything like that to identify any potential changes. So that was the initial go through. The second go through is we looked at all of our historical data, any not street openings, any reconstructions that we've done, new water mains that were installed, a lot of, even during urban renewal, a lot of the streets that were redone, Hudson Avenue, River Street, those, we have plans for all those construction projects, and that shows all copper pipe going in. The next step we did was we also started identifying streets by we worked with Central Hudson and our highway superintendent. So for Central Hudson, it was streets that were getting the new gas mains. We worked along with Central Hudson doing potholing. So we identified the curbs, the service line in the street. And then working with the highway superintendent, we looked at streets that were being milled and paved. So since the street was going to be tore up, we decided we'll tear it up a little bit more and identify the service lines that way. And the third thing, as a positive, or the fourth thing, is we worked with the meter upgrade. And as part of the meter upgrade, as they're going into properties, the technicians are identifying the pipe material that's in the house. And this is an activities detail that was uploaded last week on the 27th, and the highlighted yellow column is the service line coming into the property, before the meter. There's another column that's after the meter. And then you see here, there's on the file link, they're documenting pictures. Can't access it through this right now, but they are documenting everything in their work orders with pictures. And so, as we move along, the last thing as we identify, the government provided us with this template that everyone has to use. So we update the data into the template, and this will be updated every year on July 1st moving forward until we reach 100%. And then every year there's an inventory summary page that gets recertified and resubmitted to the EPA, New York State Department of Health, and Dutchess County Department of Health.
Any questions?
Yeah, I'm curious, Ed, do you have a sense yet? I know you're still in the process of this, it sounds like, of how we compare to other similar municipalities in terms of what our pipes are made of and any trends you're seeing?
I'm going to say we're in an extremely positive position. There are some significantly much larger cities than us that are in the range of 10,000 plus known lead. At this point, we have 7 galvanized out of the, we'll use the lesser number of the 2,400.
Right.
And Ed, just to clarify, none of our water mains are.
No,
are
yes,
lead.
that's correct.
So
Yeah.
this is really just about the service line to the individual homes from our infrastructure. So the rest of our infrastructure is lead-free already.
That's great to hear. Can you talk about the galvanized in relation to lead and copper? What is the?
So galvanized is it was a steel pipe, and during the galvanizing, depending on when it was made, the galvanizing was a rust inhibitor to stop the pipe from rusting. So the pipe was pretty much dipped in a solution. It was then coated, and then they would use that in plumbing. They still use galvanized today, but the lead's not part of the galvanizing process. So,
Oh, okay.
so,
So the lead is part of that glaze.
yeah, so we can't really determine 100% when the galvanized was installed. So it's assumed as part of the lead.
So are these all commercial, I mean, all residential and commercial properties? Everything's covered on here? Is there, like, what, if there's something that doesn't have a dot on it, what would that be at this point in time?
Is there something I'm missing? Did
Well,
we
it looks
miss?
like there were some things that, like some, maybe multi-units that were in the vicinity of that zoom in you did, maybe I think it was in Ward 2. Is there a type of building that wouldn't have, it just, if it doesn't have water service, it's not a dot? If it has water
This is
service,
all
it's
taken
not
from
a dot?
this is all taken from our billing. So everyone
has a bill.
has a bill. That's correct. And then
And
that's a
then, Jeff, there's some locations like Tompkins Terrace that have a master meter.
That's what I was wondering.
So
where
there, you
that's-
might have one or just a small number.
I think that's what we're
and then
looking
it-
at.
And then it covers all of the apartments.
yeah.
Okay.
I just opened it up the inventory again real quick. Like 1 East Main, there's one master meter for the entire building, but inside on the spreadsheet we have every unit listed. So because the units are part of like the overall inventory, but there's only one meter at the site. So
Okay. How about those several dots that are out off the coast there?
so
in
those
Hudson?
that's a great catch.
Glaring.
Those are zeros. So there we go. So this one is the powerhouse that's associated with New York State docks, the prisons. So any of the zeros that we had, we just put off to the side. So they'll eventually be removed. They're not really part of the inventory. And one of them actually, maybe this one, that's the train station. One of them is a pool meter for a swimming pool. So it's not really needed as part of the inventory.
So you still need to, there's still 2,128
Yes.
that you still have to figure it out?
Yes.
But there is no lead, or you're just not sure?
At this point, it's just unknown, right? So there's a I lost I was going two places at once there. So as we're continuing the meter upgrade, they're going to continue to identify the house side. As part of the service line, the more you identify, then you're allowed to use some statistical analysis to eliminate that there is lead, or try to prove that it's non-lead. The other thing is the team now, because we were already doing the meter upgrade, and we're going into people's homes, and we're having an unbelievable response. We're at 28% to date. The team that I'm working with on the lead service line, they've also created a customer-based response. So we could add this to the city's website as well, which would allow residents to actually update the information on their own. If we could simply create a QR code, you can scan it or enter the link, and it would take you to this form. You just simply fill it out. There's actually directions at the bottom of it that show how to identify what the pipe material is, and you can upload it to it'll automatically upload to the website.
Is this something you share in kind of a focused way where there's a property and you want to contact the owner, or is it something that we as council members could post online to?
Yeah,
boost
this was
response?
like, this is a possibility if we want it, right? So a lot of people, there's two conversations I've had when it goes back to the meter upgrade. One is it a scam, right? Which is, I actually love that question because people are being diligent. But it's also like, well, why are we doing this? And so it was almost, we didn't want to overload the residents. Like, we have our one mandate where we're updating the meters, but then the city has this mandate to do the lead service line. So we wanted to get the meter project rolling as heavily as we could and then start supplementing these other sources with it.
Because you're getting the answers when you're doing the water meter.
Yes, yeah. There's some places that have done the self-reporting, and they get like a quarter of what they send out, or their quarter of the requests. But it is another possible option for us.
I mean, we're actually fortunate.
As long as you're expecting to go to every meter in the next, whatever, 6 months, it sounds like we might want to hold on that since we're going to get there, right? I mean, otherwise, as you're saying, it might create some confusion. Don't know.
Yeah, I agree.
No, that's why we didn't move.
We didn't launch it yet.
But the dashboard, or a similar dashboard, will be available for the public to view.
When will that be available about?
Everything goes, it should be online the 16th.
Oh, okay.
So we're just moving ahead. So next week, we'll actually do the official submission ahead of schedule, and then we'll have this as a link on the city's website.
And I noticed copper isn't on this, it's a lead service line inventory, not copper line inventory, but is there something similar for copper? I saw a lot of copper in that spreadsheet, and so I was wondering if that would be.
The biggest thing is that it's not lead. Because there are like a couple of houses like internally where they've converted to PEX. So really in the street, it's either copper or it's going to be galvanized or lead.
Okay, got it. So copper is being talked about here as a safe option, not as a.
Yes,
got it.
yes. And the city, in our treatment of the water, we also use a chemical that is a corrosion inhibitor called zinc orthophosphate that helps mitigate any of the potential leaching into the water.
And that's what happened in Flint. They actually changed the formulation of what they were putting in their water, and it leached the lead out into the pipes, from the pipes into the water supply.
Any other questions?
I have two more questions, and I think they'll be quick. Did you say how soon we need to get to 100%?
They don't, it's roughly like 10 years. So every year moving forward, the idea is to kind of get through, to do the next 20% and 20%.
Okay.
I'll say this from the team that we're working with, they actually they're contracted for almost an entire other state they're covering. But they've had other water utilities reach out to them that haven't even started, and we're just weeks away from it. So they've had to turn down clients because of the workload that they're under. So I view where we're at as extremely positive.
Great.
It does bear a little clarification, though, just because it does say about lead and copper rule, and this does say in the general description, or above it in the purpose, that it's about copper-containing plumbing materials. Too.
Yes, but
So
it's
is there going to be
no,
another version?
there's no other, because copper is the most safe. And it's just the idea, because when you read into the rule, it does talk about enhancing your corrosion control and making sure you have corrosion control. They did, the original lead and copper rule didn't call for it. It just called for getting the lead out of the water, and then they started adding the corrosion control and later amendments to it. But realistically, the only other material that you would even argue would potentially the safest next phase would be glass, right? So we're not quite there yet. Like, I don't think we can actually really ever get there, but yeah.
Because of the plastic issues with PEX piping is a concern?
Yeah, I mean, you just don't, like, if you work in a laboratory, all your beakers, everything are glass, right? So there's no, so it's just, I'm not saying that PEX is bad or plastic, but there's just, right now the copper is the safest material to use for plumbing.
And my last question was, is it possible that some contractors could have, not that you're supposed to know this, but is it possible that contractors could have continued to use lead pipes after 1986 if they had just like, pipe laying around and they wanted to get rid of it? And
Well, realistically, the use of lead pipe ended in the early 1900s. So that's if on the other tab there's like houses built between 1860 and 1950, which pulls up a smaller area of the city. So that's really around between 1900 and 1930s when you saw the lead pipe stop being used.
Yeah.
Ed, can you explain if you find a lead pipe tomorrow in someone's house through the water meter replacement project, what could the owner of that property expect in terms of the required notifications and actions they might have to take?
So there's the additional sampling on our end, and then eventually as we identify more, and that is the case even with some of the galvanized, there'll be a part of not just the inventory, but then there's a replacement requirement. So let's just say you identify 100, so you have to do 3% every year after you've identified it. So there will be replacement requirements as well.
And will those start to kick in after October 16th?
No, right now it's just establishing the inventory to keep it moving.
And if someone were, if a parent, for example, were to find through us that their house had a lead main, a lead connector, we would notify them so they could get their children tested, right?
Yes, yeah. So anybody, thank you for asking that. So anybody that has like known galvanized, they're going to get a notice. And there's also a notice for the unknown as well.
Okay.
And the unknown just says, we're doing this program, and your property is unknown at this point. And the other one, they're very specific to, so this is on the screen now, this is provided by New York State Department of Health. It's a template notice that is available for water supplies to send out to property owners.
It's an interesting fact that if a child tests positive for lead, the state will send someone to your home to test your entire house
Yes.
for lead, but the process doesn't work the other way.
Yeah.
Like if you find lead, you need to take your child to the hospital, to the doctor.
You know, there's a ton of information, a wealth of information that's on the EPA's website regarding the lead and copper rule. You know, lead in the drinking water, lead in your house, lead in your paint. There's a ton of information that's on there.
If someone is concerned listening to this to go, oh, I wonder if my house was checked, my house is older than 86 and, you know, early 1900s, can they reach out to the water department and
Absolutely.
would somebody come out and look?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we've had a couple of people that have reached out to us previously just to do that. We actually.
If they do that, can they get their water meter changed at the same time?
No, no, sorry about that. That's in our contractor's hands.
Okay.
That we have helped facilitate some change outs due to some scheduling conflicts, but as for the scheduling purposes, it's on that we need them to do it.
Okay, but you could reach out if
Yes.
they're concerned
Yep.
and, well, you could answer them if it has been checked and if it is unknown.
Yeah,
and
actually,
they're concerned.
there was a resident I did speak with recently, and I was able to verify their property for them.
Okay, good to know.
Okay, Ed, when are you expecting the meter program to complete?
Next year, we did a contract extension with our provider on time due to the delays of kicking it off. So we're at hopefully we're anticipating there will be some level of slowdown over the winter, just with the holidays and some travel and other things. But it should gear back up again in the spring, and we're anticipating it being done next year.
All right, so the expectation is sometime mid next year or whatever, you're expecting this list to be 99% complete or something.
On the internal side, yes. There's still some of the additional external excavation that'll need to be taking place.
Yeah, okay.
Any other questions?
I just want to highlight the reason the city's in such great shape is that it's been working on this for years. While he was working on rebuilding our dams and planning new tanks and doing the pump station and the sewage mains and the water mains, he kept this going. And I remember thinking some years ago, like, why are we working on this? We got all these other projects. And he kept this going. And I just want to voice my appreciation for your diligence in keeping this, top of the list.
Yeah, thank you. Again, I'd like to thank my staff for their efforts. The highway superintendent, Central Hudson. I know they can be difficult in all the work that they have going on right now, but working with them, we create a really good plan around it, and even moving forward, like next year's milling and paving schedule or whatever other streets that Central Hudson has geared up, that'll be we'll continue on. And realistically, my hope is that we'll get to a spot where we can say we have so much percentage of non-lead that we can then start moving forward the statistical analysis. There we go, and get to our 100%.
And Ed will be back with us in mid-October as we discuss his budget for next year. So we can give other updates on projects and stuff then.
Great.
Thanks, Ed.
Thank you. And I thank Chris, and this has been a heavy lifting to get to this point. And
I don't know if I ever told you, but one of my kids had lead poisoning, almost neurological damage levels, and it's something that my wife and I are very educated about now. So you're helping and saving lives. Thank you.
Yeah. Good job.
Thank you.
All right, how do I get out of here again?
You're welcome to stay around, but nobody expects you to.
Did Ben disconnect me? Am I off?
Yeah, Ed, I disconnected it.
Oh, thank you.
All right.
Last chance to stay for base proportions.
Next on the agenda, certification of base proportions for the 2024 assessment. Oh, and Nick, I forgot to double check if you were online.
Nick is online.
I am, yes. Good evening. I thought Ed was taking this one, but I guess if he's leaving, I'll talk about it. So every year, the city is required to take certain actions regarding the adjusted base proportion that is used for the assessment of the real property taxes for the following year. So tonight, we're discussing the 2024 assessment roll and the adjusted base proportions that are used to set the tax rates during your budget discussions that are then used and applied to the budget to establish the tax levy of the property tax bills in 2025. If you take a look at the resolution on page 14 of the agenda packet, it sets forth 4 actions that the council will be undertaking. And all of the actions you're undertaking are based upon documents that have been reviewed and numbers certified by your assessor, Kathy Martin, in conjunction with the Dutchess County Assessment Real Property Tax Office, as well as overseen and reviewed by the New York State Office of Real Property Tax Services, who have certified the numbers and the percentages and calculations that have been certified and set forth on the documents that is before the council. So the first item you're doing is you're certifying the base percentages for the current percentages and current base proportions that are set forth in the form that on the top left is labeled RP 6701. So Kathy has just calculated what is the current assessment and the assessment ratio. The second form is RP 6703, which is on page 13 of your packet, and that sets forth the new assessments, the adjustments that are being made based upon the changes in values. And then the third action is establishing the adjusted base proportion, which is set forth in the third resolved clause of a resolution based upon the calculations on that second form. And then the fourth action you're taking is just asking the city clerk to sign the attached certification form and deliver them to New York State. What is happening this year is that the adjusted base proportion for the non-homestead parcels is increasing and the homestead parcels is decreasing, which is the reverse from what has happened in prior years. So the current percentage for non-homestead parcels, meaning the meaning the commercial, is 26.01888%. And then the new one is set forth on that form 6703. If you notice on section 3 highlighted in yellow in your packet is the new percentage, 26.61667%. And likewise, the homestead, the residential portion, is being lowered from the existing 73.98112% to that new percentage of 73.38333%. So what do all these numbers mean? Those two numbers are used to determine how much of the tax roll is taxed to the commercial properties versus the residential properties. Back in the 1980s and again in 2007, the city did a full reevaluation of its properties, and New York State allows municipalities, and Beacon is one of a handful, about 40 of them, that opted into what's called the homestead tax option that allows the municipality to ease the burden of that shift when you do a full evaluation of making sure that the property taxes are not all of a sudden shifted significantly to the residential homes. So each year, you're adjusting the percentage of commercial versus versus residential to determine how much of that tax burden is going from one class of group to the other class. So the action you're taking tonight is required so that you can apply these figures in your budget, and then that when the tax bills are prepared for 2025, they'll use these new numbers.
All right, any questions?
Nick and maybe Lee, can you remind us what the definition of non-homestead is? I think it includes apartment buildings with 3 or more units, but I want clarification on that.
We got it. So residential class is single-family homes, or 2 families or 3 families. Everything else is in the other class.
So more than 3 units. Great.
Yeah, and then condos are kind of funny. Nick, I don't know if you want to stay.
Full stop.
Well, Lee, I don't know if you want to. Judge my office normally handles this. I certainly understand condos are interesting.
In some cases, the condos are considered single units, and in other cases, they are considered not. And I don't know when and why. So, it's like, it shouldn't be that shouldn't be the case, but the statute sets up that way. The other thing I would point out, and again, this all is kind of seems really arcane, is that if you look at the top of that page that Nick was referring to, the total assessed value of homestead is $1.6 billion, and the non-homestead is about $343 million. I don't know if you see those numbers, right? So if you say, well, what portion of the tax base at full value are these two groups? And you can see it totals right around $2 billion, right? So the rough number is about 80% is slightly more than that is in the homestead, and slightly less than 80% is in the non-homestead. So you think, oh yeah, well, you'd think each would pay 80% and 20%. That's not what our rates do, right? This law was designed to increase the tax rate on the non-homestead to compensate for some desire to keep the homestead rates a little bit lower, despite the fact that they were appreciating so much in value. So this year, that share, as Nick pointed out at the bottom of the page, is going down slightly from around 74% to around 73.5%, right, for the homestead side. Just remember, in terms of how much of the tax base are the homes, they're a little north of 80%. Which explains why the non-homestead rate is higher, right? Because you ask, like, why is it higher? It's all about this calculation process. And it doesn't automatically, we don't set that rate. What we said is we use the equalization, the base proportions, and then we divvy up the tax base based on the base proportions, and that determines how much higher the non-homestead rate is from the homestead rate. Hope I did okay, Nick.
Yes. All correct. And
Would a plain English version of this, because I know this is hard to understand for people even who understand it, it's if we were to say to the public that homesteads are responsible for 73.38% of the overall tax levy, is that accurate? Of the overall
Yes.
tax? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Just want to make sure.
Right, and non-homestead for the 26%, and then you say, well, that explains, and they're 80% of the value, and therefore their rate ends up being lower, and the non-homestead's only 20% of the value, but they're taking 26% of the tax levy, and that's why the rate is higher.
Thanks, Lee.
Yeah, we don't actually set those two rates. The rates get set this way. Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Discussion?
You will be one of the best educated councils adopting base proportions.
All right, so that's ready for next Monday. Next on the agenda, proposed local law concerning local occupancy tax on hotels, motels, and short-term rentals. And Nick, you are going to lead us on that.
I am, yes. Thank you, Pam. So last year, Assemblyman Jacobson sponsored legislation that would permit the city to impose an occupation tax, Senate sponsorship as well, and then it was signed by the governor, and now you are considering the implementation of that law. Many municipalities around the state have a hotel tax, a bed tax, a room tax, and it applies to accommodations, whether it's short-term rentals such as Airbnb or at a traditional hotel. And for example, City of Newburgh, Cross River has such a tax. Many communities in Westchester have a tax. It needs to be authorized by New York State because it's unique to your jurisdiction. It's in addition to the state tax and the county tax. And so this would be an overlay on top of that tax. And our memorandum sets forth sort of some of the highlights of the law and how it will work. In essence, it's requiring that the operators of these accommodations, whether it's a hotel or short-term rental, fill out a tax return on a quarterly basis and provide that to the city's finance director, who will create forms for the filing of those taxes. And it's the obligation of the operator of the accommodation to turn in the tax receipts to the city on a quarterly basis. The city is also empowered to serve subpoenas, perform audits, and do everything that you think they would be able to do to enforce its rights under the law. The taxation amount has been set forth in the local law at 2%. The effective date is January 1st, 2025. Filings of tax returns are going to be done quarterly. Could be more, could be less, but your finance director felt quarterly was the appropriate number, and then establishes fines and penalties as detailed in our memo in the law for failure to comply with those requirements. Hotel operators will be required to register with the city's finance department and obtain a license, if you will, so that they're authorized to collect the tax, and then process the returns. And the local law also provides for a refund. If someone has overpaid or an audit shows that they overpaid us, then they can apply for a refund of those taxes. The law also recognizes there are certain exemptions under the law for state governments, for example, or for those who are living there longer than 90 days, or for those who have housing vouchers. Your local law is, in all respects, comparable to every other single hotel tax that is adopted by a municipality. The local law is subject to a public hearing. So after we workshop it, we would request that you place it on next week's agenda for the scheduling of the hearing, and then you would hold the hearing and consider adoption it. There is no referral required to any other boards or agencies.
So I had one question, which was about the administration. Doesn't the county have a hotel tax?
Correct, yes.
Why don't we just let them do it for us? And I know we may want to put this in legislation, but I'd like us to have the flexibility of saying, hey, hotel operator, you got to do this once anyway. Just, throw this in, send it to the county, and they'll do it for us. I'm not saying we will, but I think the statutes should allow that flexibility, both for us and also for the hotel operator. Because it's identical, right? I mean, whatever their rate is, it's times the number of, whatever the revenue is. If they have, right?
They're collecting the same information, and it's just adding an extra 2%, and that can then be allocated by the county to the city. We'd have to have those discussions with the county to see if they would want to do such a shared service. I will look at the law and see if we can make that modification so that it allows for an A or B type option.
Yeah, that would be great. I do know that in Massachusetts, when they instituted their short-term rental tax, there was a state component and there was a local component that localities could adopt. The state collected it all in one fell stroke. So I think it's a good process. We should just make sure that we have that ability in the statute.
Understood.
Thank you.
Related to that, Chris, I don't know if our finance department chair, Sue, if she's had a chance to weigh in on the feasibility, especially of getting this up to speed by January 1st, if we stuck with that date. It seems like a lot of this would fall on her department to manage.
I mean, we wouldn't have brought this forward if she wasn't comfortable with the timeline. In fact, we delayed it because we had other things that were more important. We were waiting on data from the county to find out what the taxable base that they tax in Beacon is, so we had an idea of what it would generate. And we would explore with the finance folks at the county whether or not they would do this as a shared service, and if not, I believe we're still prepared to do it. It's a relatively small universe of properties, and really when this is going to kick in and be much more significant to the city is when Mirbeau comes online. When you have those 65 or 70 rooms at the price point that they have, this will generate a lot more.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that raises a question that I didn't have before, which is the amenities provided through hotels that are not for the room. So let's say you're staying at a hotel and spa and you go to the spa, do you pay this tax?
No, it's
Just for the hotel?
room.
Okay.
Yeah.
My other question is, how did we land on 2% instead of 5%? Just curious.
Go
ahead, Lee.
Go ahead, Chris. I'll just add after you.
We had kicked this around internally, trying to figure out, whenever you do a new policy, you want it to be something that people would accept rather than fight and try to skirt. And we know that the taxable base right now is around 5 million, and we thought if we did the two, that 100,000 is a significant amount of revenue to the city, and try it out like that. We didn't want this to land with such resistance that people try to go around it. 2% was viewed as, we were cognizant that the county already has a tax, and if you add too much to it, you can actually damage the industry that you're taxing. And we were trying to find that balance. So Sue and I and the mayor thought that 2 would be a good place to start. It's hard to argue that that's, too burdensome.
Yeah. No, I think I absolutely agree. I actually kind of was hoping that your answer was going to be phasing it in, but the same principle of testing it. And I wanted to just propose maybe that, like we did with a couple other laws in the last few years, maybe put some language in if we haven't already, that says to come back to this for a year from now and assess how much revenue we got and how it impacted the short-term rental market and hotels, to maybe so that we kind of put a pin in for next year to potentially increase it.
So to that point, Dan, I would note that the state law actually sunsets on August 23rd of 26, unless it's extended, and typically there would be a request from the municipality to ask for it to be extended. So that might serve as a check-in point as well.
Oh, so we have to have this redone in Albany and. Yes. Okay, multiple times. Okay.
It's sunset, so we have about 18 months to try it. Okay. Maybe a little bit more. It's like 20 months.
Okay, thank you.
If we do it as of January 1.
Yeah, I did have a question about January 1, just because I happen to be looking at my own holiday plans and looking at that Christmas time, New Year's period. And so I know that in the law, it kind of depends on if you pay in advance, and maybe I'm actually thinking of short-term rentals that take deposits sometimes in advance. So maybe that's part of the public feedback, just getting an idea of, is there any issue that those who run these establishments have with setting it at January 1st? Should we push it back maybe into, March 1st? Or I don't know what date would be better. But also knowing that if it's going to end January 26th, or January 2026, if that's the state law, that we do want to get as good a runway with this as we want. I'm generally in favor of it, just wanting to make sure the implementation of it works as smoothly as possible.
Yeah, if I could add just 2 things. One, because it's on the revenue side, Every budget cycle, we will be looking at this. So I would say the natural checkpoint is already in place. And then the second one is part of the reason we also, and I think you touched on this, Dan, is you want to make sure that, how the market is working. And as you said, Chris, the example down south of imposing parking at $4 an hour is a pretty good wake-up call of being cautious of what you do, right? And that's, I think, was a decision that was a bit rash. I think going into it slowly and carefully and measuring as you go is how you do this.
The one question I had is, how is this going to be communicated, especially to the short-term rental out of their homes? I know we have a list of them now.
Yeah, so we've spent the last few years identifying many of them and getting them under license. We would do a mailing to them and notify them.
But I think that's the other reason why the county may become relevant in terms of this, right? Because they, figured out how to get a hold of them. They've got the same issue. And, Pam, you described the one extreme, which is what if you're just, doing a room? What if you're just doing, and those are going to be harder. And that's why I think working with the county will matter a lot for those. It doesn't amount to the biggest number that we might get, but we'll have to think about that administratively as well.
And we'll look at whether or not you can just have the platforms themselves remit the tax.
I was going to say, Chris, when I've researched this, that's exactly how it works. They have a whole department set up for these various platforms to assess and be aware of municipalities that have a local tax requirements, and they just build that into their programming.
Yeah.
But there will be the tax return that they'll have to submit quarterly, some type of tax document.
And they're doing that to the county. The county has a 4% bed tax, and one of the reasons that they gave us an annual grant for the Granicus application that helps us identify the short-term rentals is that they were losing bed tax. So they wanted us to help identify those, and then they could tax them. So I mean, there's a lot of room for working with the county if they're amenable to it.
I know a while ago, I think it was sometime last year, when you got the new software for the short-term rentals, did they ever come back to kind of like they were just getting used to using it and report back of how many short-term rentals we have based with the system they were using?
We have a number of them on our webpage that are like the listings of the ones that have gotten licenses. It's not been the most pressing thing. We just did a whole upgrade of our Municity, and I think that took a lot of bandwidth at the department. They are trying to get on this as time allows. Again, it's a bit of a whack-a-mole because people put them up, they take them down. We send a letter, they take them down. 6 months later, they're back up. Honestly, if you want to get rid of short-term rentals, just get rid of them because this is really onerous to enforce. And I can't tell you how many complaints we get arguing about, well, that person doesn't live here, or they do live here. We have pretty prescribed rules in our code about what shows somebody lives, quote, lives somewhere. And then if somebody shows that, they have a bill in their name, they have, their ID says they live there, we have to go by that. But I can't tell you how many arguments this leads to. It's really a cumbersome law to enforce.
Is this going to make it worse?
No, I think, again, I think your real value here is when Mirbo comes online.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're setting up for, you have a number of small boutique hotels, you have some B&Bs. We'll do our best on the short-term rentals. And again, if it doesn't go well and it's really a drain on our resources, we won't renew it when it sunsets.
Okay.
And I do want to note that we didn't ask for this. We were offered this by Assemblyman Jacobson, and then subsequently State Senator Rollison supported it. So it kind of came out without us requesting it.
It's a free $100,000.
Nothing's free, Dan.
Nothing's free, that's right. Knew you
Yeah.
were going to say that.
All right, any other discussion? Do we feel comfortable having, putting out that there's going to be a public hearing on this at our next
Yeah,
city
so it
council?
sounds, we'll vote on having a public
Yeah,
hearing
you would
at our
set the
next
public
meeting?
hearing that would be held the next meeting. So you'll vote on October 7th, and then that next meeting that you have will be the 21st.
Okay.
And any changes that Nick does with giving some flexibility to the statute, I don't think should affect the public hearing, but.
No, we would have that ready for Monday anyway, so that when you
Okay.
said it would be the current version.
Cool.
Okay, thank you.
Next on the agenda, proposed local law concerning traffic lights and fire lanes. This is
Thank you,
unique.
Pam. So we have in your packet a proposed local law that we'd ask you to consider and schedule a public hearing for at your meeting on Monday. There are no referrals required for this. We drafted this local law in consultation with your fire chief, your police chief, your building inspector, and your superintendent of streets. The law has two purposes. The first is just to correct some old language from the code regarding location of traffic lights. So that's in section 211-4. There was just some errors in there with respect to where traffic lights are located. So there's an opportunity to clean that, make it actually reflect where the traffic lights are. And so that's the first amendment in the local law before you. The second is to establish a provision that will allow for our office as city prosecutor and also for the building department or the police to provide for local enforcement of fire lanes and not rely upon state codes. And by doing so, we have an opportunity for those violations as well as should we wish to plead other violations down to have that revenue be realized by the city as opposed to the state if it's done to a state code. So what we have before you is a fire lane provision local law that in all respects models the New York State law, but it's in the local code, so we can then cite to this, and the city has the benefit of local enforcement and revenue collection. And again, it's being reviewed by the building inspector, fire and police chiefs, and we've also added a provision recognizing not only fire lanes as required by the code, but also when the planning board requires them as well, should that be a little different. My understanding is that John Russo and Bruce review the plans and make sure that the site plans all provide for fire codes when required. So the next step would be just to schedule a public hearing at your meeting on Monday.
Okay.
Nick, can you, why are these three intersections crossed out here?
Because when reviewing them with either they're not correct, either they don't exist, or they were duplicates. There's not a traffic light at that intersection.
North Avenue is 9D, so that's Main Street, and North Avenue is the light right here next to City Hall, right?
But that one's
That's a state DOT one.
Yeah, so
that's
there,
why it's removed.
3 of our lights are under the jurisdiction of DOT.
Oh, got it, okay.
Verplank and North, Beekman and Wolcott, and Main Street and Wolcott. So we don't control those lights, and we don't have any jurisdiction over them. And when we need adjustments, like the mayor has been asking for adjustments now to the Verplank light because it's been backed up so badly.
Yeah, yeah. And after South Avenue is when our jurisdiction starts on the.
That's
Walcott,
correct.
right?
Just north of South Avenue intersection.
Now, some of these don't have working lights. Is that they just need a light? Like Fishkill Avenue and Mill Street and Main Street and
Then
East Main?
it's still considered a working light because it's flashing.
Right,
So
it's a
even
traffic control device.
Even if you have yellow one way and red the other, or all red flashing, it's still considered a traffic control device that needs maintenance. And this came up in the context, we were renewing the contract with our electrician to maintain the lights, and our electrician actually couldn't get insurance to cover the lights anymore because these have been the source of lawsuits. So we basically started looking into a new contract, and then we had this list that came from the code that was sorely out of date.
So it looks like our dummy light does fall under this.
It is
as a
still
flashing light.
considered a
Light.
traffic control device,
Great.
as are all of your signs, like one-way signs, stop signs. So this is a lot of cleanup.
Yeah, do we have any fire lanes right now that just haven't been controlled under our code up to now?
No, they're controlled under the state regulations. So if
Oh, I see.
someone is fined, that money goes to the state.
So does that change if we added it to our own code?
Yes. Then it goes
Yes.
to the city.
That's an important clarification. Thank you.
That's the most important clarification.
Are there any notable differences between this and the state law? Like, is there any real change in what?
Nick, you want to answer that?
There is not. Substantially, it's the same. The only modification is just also adding a provision that it includes fire lanes that may be designated by the planning board to the extent they're different than what is required by state law.
Got it. Thanks.
So to say that another way, if I'm understanding, if you are currently a property owner with a fire lane that's in compliance with the state, there's nothing for you to do here.
That's correct, yes.
Great.
All right, any other discussion? So we'll have this on for, we'll have a vote to have a public hearing when we meet October 7th for the public hearing, October 21st.
Yes.
And last item, before we go into executive session, is Beacon Water Body Protections. Dan.
Okay. I brought this up because it's a conversation that we had actually more than 2 years ago. I thought we were at a year and a half, but a couple of years ago we started talking about water body and wetland protections, and I sent around quite late. I sent you all links to those two meetings, including the videos, and you can skip ahead to. I gave you the timestamp, so you can skip ahead to that part of that meeting. So I thought, and since I was a little delayed in getting everybody that information, to maybe keep this light. So what I thought maybe we could just talk about tonight is I can offer some of the ideas that I have found over the years for protecting Fishkill Creek. But then, really open that up for all the ideas that everybody has. I know I've spoken to a few CAC members who have additional ideas on top of the ones that I'm bringing tonight. This discussion is kind of a replay of August 2022, so what I'll list here is also what's in the videos, so I'll make it kind of quick. And then the following discussion, which I think was in a September 2022 meeting, was a presentation from Jennifer Gray about what we currently do, and possibly the city engineer. I can't remember.
John Russo
And John
was
Russo
in
was
that
there.
too.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks. So anyway, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I'll just recap what I shared before, and I just want to say again, I'm not proposing this as the end all and be all of ideas, and we really want to hear from everybody because I know that you guys all care about this issue too, because I've spoken to you, and I know that some of you have ideas. So the information that I'll share now comes from 3 different sources. These are recommendations of things that Beacon could do more to protect water bodies and wetlands. So this is coming from Newburgh's local law, creating a water body protection overlay. It's coming from New York State DEC guidance on stormwater management, and recommended local laws for water protection from the Hudson River Estuary Program at Cornell University. So the first is,
Dan, just
Yeah,
one
yeah,
second.
yeah, sure.
Please go through that. But what's hard is we need to understand the basis of what do we have in place now, because some of these things are already covered, some of them may not be, some of them may be covered in some ways versus other ways. And so I think it's going to take a while to please go through, but again, that's the context I would want everybody to understand is what do we have in place now?
That's all in the video too, Lee, and that's why I'll try to interject with a couple things as points of comparison. But in the videos that I shared, Jennifer Gregg and John Russo gave a very good overview of what we do already.
I think for those who go back and look at those videos, I did watch them today, and to Lee's point, I wasn't making that next leap, which is what of the recommendations for, say, an overlay, what would we get in addition to what we already have through other means right now?
Okay.
And so I think as we get further in this discussion, I think helping me to understand, like, the last thing we just discussed, we get money that currently the state gets. I'm like, great, I'm all for that. So like, what are the environmental benefits that we don't currently have that new protections would get us?
And if you do look at those videos, just realize that the MS4 that we're regulated under for stormwater actually changed. So again, we should probably have a baseline conversation to bring us up to date from that last touch point 2 years ago.
Great. Yeah, we want to get it right. We don't want to, okay, so, the overall objective is to protect the health of water bodies in Beacon. And the first recommendation is for a water body protection overlay, which creates setbacks from water bodies. We do currently have a setback from water bodies. It is, I think, 25 feet from the top of the bank, but I don't want to be quoted on that. The recommendation is from
sorry,
here.
for Fishkill Creek, it's an average of 50 feet, but not less than 25 feet.
There you go.
is the,
There you go.
Yeah.
So DEC requirement was 100 feet. The site plans would be reviewed by the CAC and requires mitigation plans against erosion, which I think we do to some extent already. Requires erosion and sediment control plans, which may be part of our SWIP process. And then no increase in impervious surfaces for existing developed lots, and similar or combined wetland overlay, which would include setbacks and buffers. And we do have a buffer, but not a setback for wetlands. I can't recall. Sorry, I didn't go back over that presentation before tonight. But I remember when we got the presentation on wetlands that there were some more things that we could do. Another recommendation from DEC is to have a green infrastructure requirement for all construction that takes place near the creek, which would be could be potentially in that overlay zone. And the goal would be for the green infrastructure to mimic nature by absorbing rainwater where it falls. Another recommendation is to review and improve existing controls. I can't really speak too much to this, but Chris was just talking about MS4. We have our stormwater pollution prevention plan. We do these reports. We have somebody that oversees this work, and I don't want to speak to that, but a recommendation was to review and improve those controls, but I wouldn't know where to begin with that personally. Another recommendation is to integrate where there's city property within a water protection overlay. We could integrate street trees, bioswales, and do other green infrastructure using the city property. And then the city could go to some lengths to minimize impermeable surfaces where possible within a water body protection overlay as well. Other recommendations include mapping smaller streams and wetlands, which is something that we've heard a lot from CAC members over the years, and I believe is an objective of our overall NRI OSI trajectory, and banning and removing combined sewer overflows into waterways, which I think we don't have any of those, I'm pretty sure. And then ensuring DEC protection of waters permits are being completed for disturbing beds or banks of waterways. And the idea behind the water body protection overlay is that it would cover any properties that are, be created within 100 feet of any currently mapped water body. So that would include Fishkill Creek, Hudson River, and I think Dry Brook, and potentially other places. But I'm I think that's all for us to discuss. And then also, you guys may not like any of these things and have other ideas. I just wanted to get us started on the conversation. So that's all I got.
I think what we should do is again, put the same thing on the table of what is it that we have now, because it's just hard to assess those things. Although the one thing I do know is that we have a creek. We had a set of factories on our creek, and we set up a set of protections for the creek, and also a set of Fishkill Creek design zone in our comprehensive plan. We may need to do updates to it, but for instance, a 100-foot buffer would just wipe out all the developments down there, right? And preclude any future ones. That was an overstatement, but it's like, I think you need to pretty carefully look at what have we done so far, what's in our comprehensive plan, and then say, what are the incremental things that we might do from this list? And I think we may find some things, but we may also find some things that are already covered or run contrary to our comprehensive plan, and so we'd have to figure out how that works.
Sounds good.
Okay? Yeah. And I think the reason we got to where we got was Jennifer went through it, and then we got that next step of, how do we sort what things are in between or not in between, or what are the deltas? And, maybe that's sort of our next step, is put on the table again what we have, and then start to work through, well, what's different here, so we can work through. Because I think we all kind of looked at it and said, okay, not sure how to proceed. So we might need some, kind of more definitive, like, what's different here.
Okay.
Okay. And, we'll get there. I thought, we should just start a conversation, and then it'll take us a little while to get there, because there's a level of expertise in explaining, what does this one do? What do we currently have? And it's all in the details, right?
Yeah.
We'll get there.
Yeah, I should add too, Lee, that, some CAC members have shared some additional ideas, and I can try to organize some of those, because I have notes all over the place on this, and I can try to pull those together. But those weren't really, I don't think they were really for us. These were the ideas that seemed like policy. Those seemed to be kind of grant-led or maybe community-led, but I think we can probably talk about them. For example, Sergey has been very interested in riparian buffers as a way of protecting the structure and health of the creek. What are some of the other ideas I've heard? Removing the dams, which is a whole other project in itself. So there are other ideas out there, but I don't know that they're for this table, but I can bring a list of those too.
I wonder, and given the flooding in Hudson Valley, there might even be federal money for this, if there's kind of outside expertise that can come in, because I'm assuming most of these recommendations are like, this is what communities should be doing, as opposed to an assessment of what Beacon is doing and a gap analysis of what we are not doing. And so I wonder if there's any funding that is available for things like this, again, particularly given our location along the Hudson River, and if there are ways that we can be protecting waterways, that there's just more interaction with things. So I am not, however, saying that I kind of defer, especially to you, Chris, and maybe to Lee, about how this fits in with our other city work, if there are other city staff who can take on sort of helping to do this work. And so kind of getting your input maybe at a future meeting about how to kind of be targeted in this. For example, do we take on just one of these things and assess it and kind of prioritize one, rather than try to kind of do a whole assessment of where we are? And so I think kind of look for your guidance on that, to kind of be practical and strategic with our time.
Makes sense. Other thoughts?
I know that Wappingers Falls and other communities that rely on drinking water from the Hudson had their, quite robust strategies too. Those might be, I'm sure they overlap with some of the sources that you've talked about, but it's definitely a worthwhile source to tap into. Did not mean to use a pun like that, but.
Well, thanks for that. Yeah, I did just encourage everybody to watch the second video, because that's the one with Jennifer Gray and John Russo going over what we do presently. And as Chris mentioned, there's probably been some updates since then, so maybe we can
Yeah,
spend the next time kind of doing.
I know our staff has been going to the Dutchess County Soil and Water meetings that are monthly because they updated the permit requirements, so we could get an update on that. I've had Bruce, the building inspector, Mickey, our superintendent of streets, and John Russo attending various ones of those to try to get up to speed.
Great.
And I would just say, the context-wise too, we do a lot on this already. We don't have a combined sewer overflow except for infiltration, which adds, the stormwater into our sanitary sewer. But we don't spill, we don't overflow. But it's been challenging with the change in the climate and the intensity of these storms. I mean, a lot of the upgrades that we're making to the dams, to the stormwater system, to the wastewater treatment plant are already anticipating these things. Because the two things that you do that are most protective are you manage stormwater so it doesn't cause erosion, and we clean our wastewater and we don't allow it to dump untreated into the Hudson. And we do have an executive session for contracts tonight.
Okay. All right. Not thinking there's any more discussion, so our next city council meeting is next Monday, October 7th at 7 p.m. And this will end our regular city council workshop, and we will be going into executive session. Do we need a vote to go, or with workshop, we just go into executive session?
No, we do need a motion to go into executive session, and then when you come out of it, we'll take another vote, and I understand the council will adjourn without any further discussions when it comes out of executive
And
session.
just a glimpse ahead, we'll be presenting you the proposed 2025 budget next Monday.
Great.
Susan Tucker will be here.
Okay.
Excellent.
Can I have a
Motion to go into executive session to discuss contracts?
Second.
second? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Good night, thank you.
Good night.
Right.